The Rosie and Bill Show wish to thank our partners and Positivity primary sponsors.
The Roselli Agency, based in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. Brian and his team of insurance professionals have been serving the needs of Chester County for more than 2 decades.
The Mallon Agency, located in Springfield, PA, where they take pride in tailoring the right insurance policy for the right client and exceeding expectations every time.
When I think about meant to be, I think about you and me. I never thought we'd ever be exist.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week wrote his first song at the age of 12 and landed his first on-air radio job at the age of 14. Please welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show singer, songwriter, producer, and dog enthusiast, Drew Smith. Hi, Drew. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Drew, it's our pleasure. And I have to tell you, right off the bat, you are without a doubt one of the most versatile, if not the most versatile guest we've ever had on the show. But I have to start with this. Landing your first on-air radio gig at 14, you got to share the story of how you pulled that one off.
Well, I kind of suckered my way in, really. I called the local radio station in my hometown. Grew up in a really small town in southern Middle Tennessee. And I called and I spoke with the office manager and said, hey, are you guys taking applications? And she said, well, we're really not. But she said, you have a beautiful voice. We'd love for you to come in and fill out an application and do an air check. And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And she said, okay, well, how about Thursday at 10 a.m.? And I was 14, so I was in school. So I said, you know what? 10 doesn't work for me, but I could probably come by around 3. And we got out of school at 2:30. So I knew I could make it over there by 3 o'clock. I didn't tell her that. So I just showed up on Thursday. Sure enough, 3 o'clock, I walked in and I said, hi, my name's Drew Smith. We spoke on the phone, came by to fill out an application. Man, her eyes got big. And she said, you're Drew Smith? And I said, yeah. She said, I would have never imagined you looking like that, And she said, I thought you were much older. And I said, no, ma'am, I'm not. I said, can I still fill out an application? She said, yeah, sure. She said, let me get you an application and I want to introduce you to the general manager of the station, which was actually her husband, was a guy named Foxy Griffith. And Foxy had been station manager for years and years and years, was really well known around town. And so I went into his office and I sat down and we talked. And Foxy at that time, I know, had to be around 70 years old or so. And he asked me who my family was. And I told him, and he asked me who my grandparents were. And he knew my grandfather. They played basketball together when they were in school, back before they even had basketball courts. They were still playing on like dirt courts. And he said, oh, yeah, Charlie Gray. He said, yeah, I played basketball with him. He said, well, come on in here and do an air check for me. We'll give you the local news. You can read that and record it. So we'll have it. And honestly, I think that was the reason that I got the job. Was that he knew my grandfather from years ago. They hadn't seen each other in years, but they had that history together. And I really think that that's probably the only reason I got that job. And that's okay. It was a great job. It was a ton of fun. I started off just as a board operator, and then they started letting me read the weather and then local news. And then eventually I had my own shifts and went down to Muscle Shoals when I was 16 and started working as a DJ down there, and was eventually hired by Sam Phillips, who, created Sun Records, the famous Sun Records in Memphis, who signed Elvis and Johnny Cash. And yeah. So all about Sam Phillips. So I got to work for him before he passed away for a couple of years. And that was a really, really great experience.
Oh my gosh, so many questions are coming to mind from that story. Let's see, where do I start? First of all, what is the age where you're allowed to work in Tennessee? Here, it's like 15, I think. I don't think it's 14. You're pretty young now.
I think it's 12 or 13 here, or
Oh,
it was at the
wow.
time.
Okay.
Of course,
Okay.
they, the child labor laws are pretty tight here. You can only work, from these hours to these hours. It's pretty tight. But back then, I'm talking like it was the 1930s. It wasn't that
Right.
long ago, but it was long enough ago. It was long enough ago that they were able to get away with that
Okay.
more easily than they probably could now.
And how did you get to the interview? Did you ride your bike over there?
My it was my tricycle. Uh, my mom picked me up from school and she took me over there. And I remember walking in. I was in eighth grade, if I'm not. Yeah, I was in eighth grade, but I was playing with the high school marching band. And so because I was in the high school marching band, I had a Letterman jacket. I was able to get my Letterman jacket early. And so I walk in there at 14 years old with a Letterman jacket, ready to fill out an application. It's pretty ridiculous to think about now.
Wow, that is awesome. And she is right. Your voice is beautiful. That was the first thing that I said to Bill when I heard you sing. I'm like, wow, his voice is so deep and so resonant. I can
Thank you.
understand why she thought you were older than you are. Um, did you know you wanted to be a disc jockey? When did that morph into, the performing career and the on air career?
I was always fascinated by disc jockeys. So my childhood, I caught the tail end of probably the one of the greatest eras of radio that existed. Um, I came in kind of growing up on the tail end of all of that before the big corporate buyouts. When, you know, disc jockeys were actually personalities. And now you've got on-air personalities that are playing disc jockeys. So much of it is so corporate. And there's nothing against that, but they're not able to have much of a personality now. There's so many sponsors and liners that they have to read, and they kind of stick with one thing. But back then, man, radio was wild, and it was really a ton of fun. And so I was always fascinated by that. But what worked out well was that it was a job that allowed me to be around music and listen to music all day while getting paid to do it.
Well, let's go back to your writing a song at the age of 12. What inspired that, and what does a 12-year-old have to say lyrically?
Oh, I had nothing to say then. I can assure you. I grew up loving great songwriters. I was exposed to really, really great songwriters. My parents, the artists that they really dug into and that they listened to the most of them wrote their own material. And the songwriting was just amazing. But I was also growing up, with 90s country music as well. And a lot of those artists weren't writing their own songs, but the songs were phenomenal. And so I just fell in love with the idea that someone was out there writing these songs that I loved so much, that someone was making this stuff up. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. We had cassettes and CDs, mainly cassettes when I was really young. You remember pulling out the liner notes of cassettes? Like that was awesome. And it had lyrics, and then it had, the engineer and the songwriters under each song, and who played bass and drums, and it was just a whole list. And I remember when I started connecting dots, like I listened to whatever country record over here, and then I'd pull out a tape, from Mark Chestnut or whoever, and I'd go, wait a second, I recognize this guy's name that played drums. What was that other record that he played drums on? And so I started to put together in my head that people were getting to do this for a living. Like this wasn't just a one-off thing where they got lucky and they got to play drums one time on a great record. Like this was what they do. And these were A-list session guys. And the guys that were writing these great songs were the A-list songwriters. And so that was really where all that began. So that's what I want to do. I want to be in the liner notes.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to fast forward just a little bit, Drew, to what sounds like an amazing night. As growing up, one of your influences and musical heroes was Merle Haggard. And lo and behold, of all places, at the Ryman Auditorium, you get to open for Merle and with some pretty special people in the audience. So I have to ask, what was that experience like, and what kind of feedback did you receive after the show?
Uh, I don't know where you guys have gotten all your information, but man, you're good at digging because you know everything. That was a phenomenal night. It was maybe, I mean, I don't, there's not much else that can top that night for me, regardless of what happens. Playing the Ryman Auditorium is such a special experience. Merle Haggard always did 2 shows at the Ryman, and it was because he kind of had to. Because the first night would always sell out so quickly, and it would be to the industry people. So none of the fans really would get to see the show. It was all industry execs that would scoop up all the tickets. So he would always add another night, but I played that first night with all the execs, and it was really wild. I hadn't been writing songs full time, but maybe a couple of years or so. And I'd had maybe a couple of cuts, but it wasn't anything major. But to sit there, in a room full of my peers and people that I really respected and looked up to, and not only that, but a room full of movers and shakers. I mean, that was the people that make it happen.
Drew, I have to interrupt you. How did you snag that gig?
Just dumb luck. It was really just dumb luck. My agent called me kind of last minute. He might have called me that morning and said, "Hey, you want to open for Haggard tonight?" And at the Ryman. Okay.
Yeah, let me check my calendar.
Yeah. Stand by. I got some other things I'll have to put off. I met Merle, I think the day before. He called me, same kind of scenario. My agent's a crazy guy. And he called me and he said, "Hey man, Merle Haggard's at the Hall of Fame today. And he's doing this, this like filmed special at the Country Music Hall of Fame. And we're all just hanging out. Why don't you come over?" And man, I dropped everything and I ran over there. And so that's when I met Merle, and we got to hang out and chat a little bit. And then I guess it was the next night was when I opened the Ryman for him. And then he went on to record one of my songs, a matter of a few years or so later. Yeah, really special night, special period in my life, for sure.
Well, you have a good agent.
He's really good. Yeah. He's really, really good.
Over the years, in addition to that wonderful experience, you've had the experience of working with many, many talented songwriters. How has that shaped you as a songwriter?
Oh man, I think in a lot of ways. I think every writing session that you have, there's so much to, even if you're writing songs by yourself, I think there's something that you can learn every time, even if you don't realize it. You're growing and you're working, those creative muscles. Excuse me, but to have co-writing sessions with other professional songwriters, man, it rubs off on you. Every single time is an experience, and you pick up something. And again, sometimes you don't always notice it at first, but eventually you figure, oh man, I got that from that guy. And everybody just has a different idea of how to write songs and what works for them and what doesn't. And so everyone's angle is kind of different. And I think that really what ends up happening is we all kind of influence each other in some way, whether it be good or bad. I've probably been a bad influence on a lot of people, but yeah, it's in so many ways it's shaped me for sure.
Well, now, Drew, one of those songwriters that you worked with, you talked about, how we did a lot of digging, and we always do. We do our homework. Bobby Pinson.
Bobby.
Who, I met years ago, and he actually signed this CD for my daughter.
The Man Like Me album, right?
Yeah. Don't ask me how I know.
Did it?
Sorry, I had to. But yeah, so what was it like working with Bobby?
Oh, terrifying. Terrifying. Bobby is a very unique, very eccentric guy. I mean, he's brilliant, man. My God, he's brilliant. I've always had a ton of respect for him. I was a huge fan of his when that album came out.
Yeah.
And I bought it as soon as it came out because I remember the single being on the radio.
Hmm.
And then I heard him promoting, the album was coming out. So I went, like immediately and bought the record. And just every single song on that album was incredibly written.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I want to hang out with this guy, And so years later, when he lost his record deal or quit, however that happened, he was writing songs full time, and I got hooked up with him, and we wrote a really great song that first day. And but it's intimidating because he is such a monstrous songwriter. There's not many guys that I've been in the room with that I've been intimidated by, but Bobby's one of them. And he definitely doesn't wake up in the morning and set out to intimidate his co-writers. That's definitely not what he does, but it's a thing. It's a real thing. And I've, so many other people that have that write with him or have written with him have all said the same thing. It's, man, it's a spiritual experience, but it's a terrifying experience just to see the genius at work. But you go, man, I don't want to say anything because he's going to think I'm an idiot.
Wow.
No, I can understand. I've always wondered what it would be like to, to sort of be in the room with a Bobby Pinson or a Jeffrey Steele or even you. I mean, that's just got to be such a great, feeling, and just the creativity and the energy. It would just be a great experience, I think, for anybody to be in that room when that wonderful stuff is going on.
Jeffrey's really great too. He's also a phenomenal songwriter. It's a ton of fun, man. Those guys, man, they've had a good run and it's still going.
I want to just switch gears just for a second, Drew, because, we talked in the beginning about your versatility. And, in addition to the songwriting and singing your own songs, you've also helped a lot of other artists get their music out through Gray Sound Recording Services, your studio. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, what led to you kind of stepping over to the other side of the glass?
That was by accident as well. So when I got my first songwriting deal, they signed me as an artist writer. And that was great because that exposed me to a lot of things as an artist. And I was given a lot of great opportunities through that. One of those things that came with that was working with really great producers. One in which was a guy named Billy Joe Walker Jr., who had he produced just some huge stuff, from Bryan Adams to the Dixie Chicks, just a major producer. And one of the, probably, I would say one of the most respected producers in town. And Billy passed away a few years ago. We lost him, but man, I started going into the studio. They would send me in the studio with him, and he was producing all my stuff at the time. And I was learning so much from him, just picking up a lot. I mean, every time, just how to talk to people, how to talk to musicians, how to get what you want out of them, how to talk to artists. I realized that was a bit of a game as well. When I'd be cutting vocals, he was producing my vocals, and he'd be sitting there next to the engineer in the studio and in the control room, and he'd hit the talkback mic and he'd say something. And then next thing you know, I'd get the line right. And there was some psychology with that. So I started kind of picking up on those things. And I had gotten, like a couple of microphones and some headphones, and got Pro Tools, which is the standard, recording software. And I got all that just so that I could make cleaner, better work tapes for my new songs that I was writing. And I started having friends that go, hey man, I got this song that I want to put down. Can you record it for me? And I go, yeah. So I'd record it for them. And hey man, me and the band, we got like 6 songs. We want to make an EP. Can you record it? And I go, yeah, I'll do that. And it didn't have the equipment, didn't have like the knowledge of how to do it, but I did it anyway. And these guys had no budget, and they had no experience. I also had no budget, but I had some equipment and I had some experience. And so I started helping these guys through the process, and I really fell in love with that. So I've kept doing it ever since.
That's great. So Drew, before we go, I have a quick question that has nothing to do with music. Apparently you are a big dog enthusiast.
Yes, absolutely. All
Where
dogs.
does that come from?
Probably my mother and my father. My dad raised hunting dogs when he was a kid, and he'd train them. And my mother loves all creatures, great and small. And so I think that was just kind of in my DNA. But yeah, huge dog lover, huge dog lover.
That's wonderful.
Okay, so Drew, I've got one last thing I want to ask you about, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this, and that's your most recent single, X's. So talk to us about what inspired that song. And from what we've seen, it's been critically acclaimed. And when it first came out, I believe it was back a couple months back, digital radio was adding it like crazy for weeks after it came out. So what inspired it, and how do you feel about all the feedback you've received about it so far?
Well, the inspiration was my partner said she was going to leave me. And I said, well, you don't want to do that because we're going to spend like the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 months calling each other in the middle of the night. Like, I'm always going to pick up because I'm a sucker. And then we're going to like go through the whole thing again and where it went wrong. And then we're going to cry and be sad, and we'll do it again, like, 5, 6 days later. And this is going to go on for months. So let's just skip all that. And let's just not break up. And so that was where it came from, was, you're going to call me when you've been drinking or in the middle of the night. I'm going to pick up, I'm going to give in every single time. So that was the entire verse just kind of fell out just from that joking conversation.
I'm glad you guys are still together.
Yeah. The reception, Bill, has been, it's always overwhelming. Even if, 3 people like it, I get excited about that. I just want, I think any songwriter and any artist just wants someone to connect, whether it's one person or 1,000 or 1,000,000. That's really why we do it, is just to connect. And so the reception of that was really awesome, and the way that digital radio picked it up was pretty wild. I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, they jumped on it fast, and they were real good to me. I'm very grateful for that.
Well,
Well, I can tell you, Drew, when I listened to the song, and Rosie felt the same way, we were like, wow, and that's like she said earlier when she talked about your voice and just, but again, it's the lyrics, it's the stories, it's all of it together in that one song. You really put it all together quite well in Exodus.
Oh, thank you. Sure. I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Sure. So I lied when I said I had one last thing. I got one last thing.
All right.
On your Facebook page, just a couple of days ago, there might have been a little bit of hints as to some things that could be coming maybe in 2023. Now that we're in the new year, anything in the works that you can share with us before we go?
Absolutely. I've got 3 new ones coming out February 7th. I won't tell you what they are yet. I got 3 brand new ones that are coming out February 7th. And then March 7th, I've got an entire EP coming out. So the 7th of the next 2 months are going to be really exciting.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm glad that I asked. And folks, there's definitely something to look forward to there, the February 7th and March 7th. So Drew, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great getting to know you and hearing some of these stories and all these amazing things that you've done. And it sounds like there's a lot more amazing things in store for you here in the new year. So thanks so much for coming on with us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's really been a great time. Thanks a lot.
You got it. Well, folks, thanks so much for watching. We really enjoyed having Drew here with us. We hope you did too, and we'll see you next week.
I'm a busted up, broke down, leave you with your thumb out, standing on the side of the road. I get you nowhere quick, run you straight in a ditch, send you walking back all alone. You do your best to fix me, I'm good for a couple weeks, and I'll let you down again. All the dents and the rust would have been too much for anyone to deal with. You find a few more miles in me when I'm almost empty. Keep me running better than I should be. Oh, 'cause I should be somewhere on the side of the street, watching you leaves, looking back at me, falling apart, headed for the junkyard. If I was a car, you could trade in, trade up, be the girl in the truck sitting pretty at the wheel, where the dust and the dirt and the putting in the work ain't gotta be part of the deal. But even on a bad day, we're flying down the highway here, blowing in the wind. I'm looking over at you, ripping off a rear view. It don't matter where we've been, 'cause you find a few more miles in me when I'm almost empty. Keep me running better than I should be. Oh, 'cause I should be somewhere on the side of the street, watching you leave, looking back at me, falling apart, headed for the junkyard. If I was a car, I'd be up on blocks in a second-hand lot, the engine shot, the title hot, or just straight forgot. You find a few more miles in me when I'm almost empty. Got me running better than I should be. Oh, 'cause I should be somewhere on the side of the street, watching you leave, looking back at me, falling apart, headed for the junkyard. Oh, I never would have made it this far if I was a car. If I was a car.